Terrence Edwards Jr. and Reyne Smith led the way in Louisville's victory over Miami.
You are Locked On Louisville, your daily podcast on the Louisville Cardinals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Card Nation, what's going on, everyone? And welcome into this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm your host, Dalton Pence. This is my fifth year covering the University of Louisville, third year hosting this show. And I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, Locked On Louisville, free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All you have to do, visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Louisville Cardinals defeated the Miami Hurricanes 88-78 at the KFC Yum Center on Saturday, the second straight win for the Cardinals after losing to Georgia Tech last weekend. Terrence Edwards Jr. and Reyne Smith combined for 53 points. Now, this was a game that Chucky Hepburn didn't play in, but the Cardinals had to deal with more injury news. James Scott went down in the first half and did not return. We'll talk about whether or not both players will be ready for the next game against NC State. We'll look at what went right and what went wrong offensively and defensively in this game. We mentioned all week how Louisville had to handle business this week. We've seen cases in the past in which a tournament team or a tournament hopeful team loses a game to one of the worst teams in the net rankings in the Power Four, and it completely destroys their tournament chances. Just a couple years ago with the Louisville Cardinals, Clemson lost to the 4-win Louisville Cardinals, and, well, what happened? You saw the Tigers miss the big dance. And I'm not saying that this is the same situation, that if Louisville would have lost to Miami or Boston College, it would have been the same thing. But if you would have lost a game to a team, because both of them were the lowest in the Power Four, outside of the top 200, if you would have lost to one of those teams, it would have completely destroyed your net ranking. But the Cardinals handle business like they need to. This was a weird game because we mention injuries all the time with this team. 2 players automatically redshirted due to injuries, Ali Khalifa and Kobe Rogers. And then early on in the season, Corin Johnson out for the year, Kaysen Pryor out for the year. So you don't really have that large of a rotation as it is. And then, to make matters worse, Chucky Hepburn gets hurt in the second half against Boston College. He doesn't play against Miami. To go even further, not really halfway through the first half, but right around the second media timeout of the first half, James Scott got hit in the mouth, immediately had to leave the game, and did not return. Now, it was later ruled as dental surgery. He had to go straight to the dentist/hospital and get his teeth worked on. So hopefully this is not a long-term thing. I don't imagine it will be. But from what it sounds like, either he lost a couple teeth or chipped a couple teeth. Doesn't sound like it has anything to do with the jaw, which is encouraging for the Cardinals. But you have all those players go down, and granted, if there is a team that you would like to play being extremely shorthanded, it has to be Miami. The Hurricanes were 5-17 coming into this matchup, 1-10 in conference play. Before winning against Notre Dame last weekend, they had lost their last 10 games. Still, though, when you're that shorthanded and one of the players that you've lost is your do-it-all star point guard, and the other one is your, I'll say, legitimate, or your only legitimate rim protector, like true rim protector and post presence, like the Cardinals had to play small ball for the majority of the game. And I think that it took its toll on the Cardinals defense. Louisville's offense didn't really miss a beat that much. I mean, they scored 88 points, and that's pretty on par for teams playing against Miami. Like, they score a lot of points, but Miami also scored a lot of points. Now, some of these shots you just sort of have to tip your hat to and say good job and go to the next play, and we'll get more into that in the final segment of the show. But shout out to Terrence Edwards Jr. Shout out to Reyne Smith. Both of those guys played huge minutes. I mean, you look at the starting minutes. Terrence Edwards Jr., Javon Hadley, and Reyne Smith. 40 minutes, 39 minutes, 39 minutes. Like, those three guys just barely came off the court. Terrence Edwards did not come off the court unless it was for a timeout or going to halftime. I thought Kenai Roots gave some big-time minutes. He had that slam in the second half where it's like, okay, he's getting the ball out on the break. It's him and one defender, and he's got a running start. I'm like, this could be a poster. And it seemed like the defender got there a little late or made a business decision and really didn't jump. But it was nice to see Louisville get back in the win column. I saw in a couple of chats that I'm in, and I had a couple people text me as well. And let me preface what I'm about to say by suggesting that these aren't truly pessimistic fans, but I think the loss to Georgia Tech and the lackluster first half at times against Boston College has sort of got people a little worried. I was getting texts saying, well, how's Louisville only beating Miami by 10 points? I mean, the spread was 18.5 and moved to 17.5 when Chucky got hurt. And, all these things went wrong, and the Cardinals were up by single digits in the second half. And I agree with the merit of the argument. Like, I feel like the Cardinals, even shorthanded, had multiple chances. What were they up? It was 68-54 with like 10 minutes to go in the game, and Miami immediately went on a run. Like, don't get me wrong, it wasn't perfect. Not by any stretch. The shooting the ball wasn't perfect. They missed a good amount of open shots. They gave up a couple open shots. Not great. I mean, when you look at the numbers, it's not gonna scare you when I tell you what the numbers look like. But I just feel like this fan base is getting back to the point to where, the happiness for the day rides on one game of Louisville basketball. Like, a game of Louisville basketball can either save or ruin your mood for the exact day. And I think that that's truthfully just awesome to see, in the sense that we're no longer apathetic like we were the past couple of seasons. But the truth is that the Cardinals were extremely undermanned. They were extremely shorthanded. They had 8 players play. Frank Anselmibe has been a guy that has only played minutes here and there, very sparingly. He had to play 7 minutes. And outside of that, one of the other 8 players that you had was James Scott. He played 7 minutes. So, I mean, when you have 3 guys that were relied upon to play at least 39 of the 40 minutes, of course, fatigue is going to set in. But I'm not really going to look too much into winning a game by 10 when you didn't have James Scott for almost the entire game and you didn't have Chucky Hepburn. Now, look, I get it. You still have a good amount of season left to go. You need to get James Scott back. You need to get Chucky Hepburn back. And by the way, I would suggest that both of them have a really good chance at playing against NC State on Wednesday. I think James Scott will be back. Of course, this is intuition and some preliminary things I'm hearing, nothing truly concrete. I think Chucky Hepburn could have played limited minutes against Miami. It sounds like he practiced this week in limited fashion. But against Miami, you're still, predicted to win by a good amount. So it's one of those sit him now and have him for the rest of the season and, build that health up and also give him a little bit of a break because he's had to be Louisville's go-to guy all season long and shoulder a ton of that workload. But I don't like, I watched this game and there were times where I was frustrated by certain plays, but winning the game by 10, I left the KFC Yum Center on Saturday like, oh, cool. We've won our second straight game. We're one game closer to creating a win streak at 3 games and just continuing to eliminate the possibility of bad losses. So, but Chucky Hepburn and James Scott being out, players needed to step up offensively. Terrence Edwards Jr. and Reyne Smith did exactly that. More on that coming up on this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started. There's no better place to get in on that action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game. So even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. If you're looking for a larger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my Houston Rockets for a late-game rally or honestly losing a fourth quarter lead or picking a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I missed my chance. Plus, the app is easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers could get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. I was really interested to see how the offense would flow with no Chucky Hepburn in the game. And to push that narrative even further, especially with no James Scott in the game. How was Louisville going to do on the offensive glass? How was Louisville going to fare in the paint? And overall, the Cardinals did what they needed to do. They shot 49% from the field, 36% from 3, and 92% from the free throw line. And it was mainly because of 2 players. Now, not only just 2 players, because Javon Hadley also scored in double digits, but Terrence Edwards Jr. and Reyne Smith combined for 53 of the Cardinals' 88 points on Saturday. Edwards was 10 of 16 from the field, 3 of 4 from behind the arc, and 4 of 4 from the free throw line. He had a game-high 27 points. He also had 10 assists and 5 rebounds. Reyne Smith, on the other hand, got back on track, 7 of 19, 6 of 16 from 3, and 6 of 6 from the free throw line. And then, not to mention, Javon Hadley had 12 points. Kenai Roots had 9 points, and then Noah Waterman had 8. But Edwards was the one player that I was watching the most because he was going to be PG1 for the game. Like, he was going to have to be Chucky Hepburn's direct replacement, and he was. He was the point guard for the entire game. He played all 40 minutes, and he was extremely effective and efficient. Like, he only had 2 turnovers. He had a couple of shots to where you're like, come on, Terrence, you don't have to take that shot. But 10 of 16 from the field, 3 of 4 from 3. He got to his spot. He was comfortable with the ball in his hands. I tweeted out some highlights from Greenlight Media that you can check out on my Twitter at @dpence_, and it shows some of the passes that Edwards made, and it's like, okay, Terrence. A couple of passes on the drop down to either Traore or Hadley. He had a couple really good passes to Reyne Smith, and did what he needed to do, not just as a scorer, because the Cardinals had to replace the scoring production of both Chucky and James, but as a facilitator. 10 assists in this game. Some really good passes. Ball handling was solid. Miami's not a team that forces a ton of turnovers, and Louisville really didn't hurt themselves all that much in this game. They got back on track. The assist-to-turnover ratio was incredible. 20 assists to 8 turnovers. I would argue that anytime I see that stat pop up, there's a really, really good chance that you're winning a basketball game. So Terrence it just looked like he felt comfortable leading the offense, getting to his spot, had a couple of solid one-on-one opportunities where he took it to the basket and finished around the rim and did what he does best, and that is be a slasher. And he's not really a guy that's going to light it up from three all the time. He is a streaky three-point shooter. He's a respectable three-point shooter, but Edwards is at his best when he's getting downhill and going towards the basket. And one thing is that he utilized the screens really well, and he did a lot of that without James Scott. And James Scott has become more and more of a key part of the offensive cohesion, because when he gets the ball at the top of the key, he's making really good reads, making really good passes, and just hurt the Cardinals that he wasn't out there. So Edwards, we'll discuss a little bit more about him on tomorrow's episode of the show, but I thought he was fantastic. Honestly, the best performance of the year from him overall. And I came away from the game more impressed by his facilitating than I was him as a scorer, despite him having 27 points. It was also nice to see Reyne Smith get back on track. Not the greatest shooting, 7 of 19, but the fact that we saw some three-pointers go in was awesome. He had not really been himself the past couple games, and he made 6 three-pointers in this game to have 26 points. The range was wild. He had 2 situations where he got the defender up in the air. One where I'm not sure how that didn't go in for an and one. Like, the ball just rolled around the cylinder about 5 times before it rimmed out. But then a couple minutes later, he took a shot about 4 feet behind the three-point line and got fouled on that and made the 3. And those were big-time scores for this Cardinals team that was only up by single digits when Reyne Smith took those shots and got fouled. So the timing of the three-pointers was huge. What else is there more to say? Reyne is an electric three-point shooter, but this game needed him to be himself. You don't have Chucky. I feel like Chucky would have been really good in this game. Chucky probably would have scored 20 points in this game. Even James Scott, I feel like James Scott, had he not gone down, he hadn't scored a single point in the game. He was 0 for 1 shooting, and the one shot was a three-pointer. But I feel like he would have cleaned up the offensive glass. There were a couple opportunities there. Louisville had 11 offensive rebounds, and they out-rebounded Miami by 6. Not too terribly great, but not bad whatsoever. Offense, I'm not going to criticize much when you are down your go-to point guard. Truthfully, the offense was really good. Really good. A lot of the offense came from 3 players, but you still got 8 from Noah Waterman. He was 3 of 7. He had 2 3-pointers. He also had a dunk where he got fouled on. They didn't call it. Kenai Roots, 4 of 8 from the field, 9 points. He had 6 rebounds. Really liked what we saw from him. Abubakar Traore missed a couple of really close layups. Now, that's one thing, is like Louisville has to do a better job of just stop missing shots from point-blank range right close to the basket. That's become an issue. Well, it's really been an issue all season, where they've just missed layups more than they've needed to. But you score almost 90 points, and you shoot 49% from the field, 36% from 3, and 92% from the free throw line. It's going to be hard to criticize that. And honestly, if there's one thing that I'll criticize, is that Louisville didn't shoot it better from three-point land. They could have. 35.5%. They made 11 three-pointers, and they shot 31. They could have made considerably more because they had the looks. Miami was, coming into the game, the worst three-point shooting defense in the country. Not the ACC, not the Power 4, but the entire country. Like, out of the 355 teams that get ranked in these different parameters, Miami was number 355, and it's because they give up a ton of open shots. Now, one issue for Louisville this year is that sometimes they don't hit their open shots. It happened against Miami. They had open looks that just didn't fall. Reyne had a couple of open shots. Noah Waterman had a couple open shots. Kanai Roots had a couple open shots, and those shots just did not fall, and they were able to make it more respectable. The shooting wasn't great in the first half. They were able to make more threes in the second half, which was nice, but could have been a lot more than 35.5%. Cardinals did what they needed to do offensively. 88 points. Guys stepping up. Team short-handed. Did what they needed to do. Defense, I think, is where if you were to criticize this game, a lot comes from the defensive side. However, not having your go-to rim protector, Miami just hitting some shots where you're just like, okay, man, good job, man, good job. We'll discuss what went right and what went wrong for Louisville's defense when we come back on the final segment of this Monday edition of the Locked On Louisville podcast. Cardinal fans, again, I want to take the time to personally thank you all for making us your first listen of the day. Just a reminder, the show is free and available on all streaming services 5 days a week, your team every day. Do want to give you a heads up. This episode being released at about midnight on Monday morning. Tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, technically about 6:20, I will have new Louisville head volleyball coach Dan Meskey on Mondays with Dalton Pence on Big X Sports Radio. You can tune in 1450 AM, 96.1 FM, WXVW, or there is a link to the stream, which is going to have a better quality. If you go to my Twitter at @dpence_, you'll be able to check that out at 6:20 Eastern Time tonight on Mondays with Dalton Pence. But wrapping up the show, we're going to look to the defensive side of the ball. The Cardinals gave up 78 points, and again, have to continue to point out, you didn't have your arguably best point of attack defender in Chucky Hepburn, who is really good at on-ball defense. You didn't have James Scott, who is your best rebounder. Your only legitimate rim protector, and he's 6'11". Like, the Cardinals just didn't have a ton of size when he went out of the game. Miami's not a terrible defense. I'm sorry, not a terrible offense. They average over 70 points a game. It's not the offense that holds Miami back. It's the defense. But Miami's offense, they had a guy, A.J. Staten-McRae, go for 22 points, which is 9 more points than he has had in any game this season. He averages what? He averaged 6 points coming into the game. Most he had scored a game this season was 13. He had 22 points. He was just making shots to where it was like, all right, man, good shot. A lot of these were really well defended. Really well defended. They shot 51% from the field. Now, some of these, they just sort of sought out matchups against either Reyne Smith or Noah Waterman, and they took it to the rim, and they got a ton of and ones. Miami played really physical. They got to the rim, and whether it was the mid-range, the floater game, it wasn't really encouraging to see the Hurricanes offense do well from around the restricted area. Now, they didn't really shoot well from three-point land. They were 6 of 21, 29%. They're not a great three-point shooting team. They were 6 of 12 from the free throw line, too. And they also turned the ball over 10 times. Louisville did a good job of forcing some turnovers. Could have been more, but again, Miami doesn't really turn the ball over a ton either. So they didn't get a ton of assists. Like, the assist to turnover ratio, they had a 7 assists to 10 turnovers. Not really all that good. It was a physical game. They made some shots. Matthew Cleveland, A.J. Staten-McRae, Devon Ugochukwu, and Lynn Kidd, they made their shots. Now, this is a Miami team that their smallest starter was 6'3". Miami had a ton of size. When you lose James Scott, I know that you have some versatile defenders that can switch onto different positions. Still, you're going to struggle when you don't have that size in the front court. I really would have liked to have seen James Scott in the middle during the second half where Miami had 40 points, because I don't feel like they are that successful with James Scott being able to alter shots. And if he doesn't get the block, he at least is able to contend the shot. And what's that going to do? Well, it's going to throw the team off a little bit. So I'm trying my best not to really look too much into this. I do wonder, for a team that doesn't run, I don't think that they've run it at all this season. And if they have, it hasn't been much. Pat Kelsey is a man-to-man defensive head coach. And rarely ever, I wouldn't say rarely ever, but it's not that big of a surprise that teams don't really switch up their defensive philosophy much. But I do want to know, and I wonder how successful this could be. ACC doesn't really have that many great shooting teams, but it is a league that is physical. They play physical. They don't run zone much, but I wonder what the benefit would be if they did. Because you're seeing the Cardinals sort of get bullied and having guys taking the ball to the basket and finish around the rim. It's happened the past 3 games. Now, it's not as bad as some people want to make it out to be, but I mean, with James Scott out for the game, or even with him back, if you're playing a team that is able to get into the lane and finish around the basket, would it be beneficial for the Cardinals to try its own? I don't think it would hurt. Like, I think that there are times this season where the Cardinals really would have benefited. Now, if you're going against a really good three-point shooting team, maybe that's not the case. But the Cardinals are also giving up a ton of open shots from 3. Now, thankfully, Miami didn't hit a good amount. But there's a reason why the Cardinals, coming into the game, gave up 35% to their opponents from behind the arc. And that is because people are like, well, how does this? It feels like every team just shoots out of their minds against the Cardinals because there's so many open shots. Is that they swarm the ball handler. They'll hedge the screen. But rotating has been an issue at times. It hasn't always been an issue. Like, these issues, you see the context, and the context is that Louisville did win this game by 10 points when they were extremely undermanned and shorthanded. But Miami was doing it to Louisville. Boston College was doing it to Louisville. Georgia Tech. You're going to go up against an NC State team that plays physical. Notre Dame is a team that plays physical. You're playing those teams on the road this upcoming week. Maybe something to look at. Now, Notre Dame might not be a team that you might want to play zone against, but NC State could. But just my thoughts. When we come back on tomorrow's episode of the show, we'll discuss a little bit more about Terrence Edwards and his ability to lead the offense. We'll dive into a weekly mailbag segment, hoping we will get a Locked On crossover episode with either Grayson Boone or Kenton Gibbs from Locked On Wolfpack ahead of Wednesday night's game, but we'll see. Until then, everyone have a great day. Have a great start to your week. We'll see you right back here tomorrow. Go Cards.